Evan Reese is the head of product at Oval, a design studio with a group of designers and engineers focused on creating the most integrated product development team possible. Evan and his team have been using Onshape since the company was founded over 5 years ago, and they haven't looked back since. Evan has been the first person, he actually was the first person to pass the Onshape professional certification exam, and was the first placed team for the first annual design competition in 2021 at Onshape Live. And guess what? He won again.
I'm back.
so we had to have him back. Evan is also a superstar as far as, presentation, feature script, and just being an overall nice guy. So, Evan, welcome back.
Yeah, happy to be here.
Happy to have you actually here on the podcast. We've been doing the podcast now. We're up, this is what episode 15 now.
15.
So, yeah. And, we thought it would be cool to catch up with you. And first of all, congratulations on back-to-back championships, winning at Onshape Live for, in this case, the feature script category. So maybe you can tell us a little bit about that, Evan. What brought you into throw your name into the competition and how you got involved in feature script, perhaps, and
Yeah, well, it's nice to have a competition that I don't have to prepare for other than already doing Onshape for fun. So that made it easy to enter. I didn't have to carve out time or come up with a new feature for it. And I've been writing features for a couple of years now and just kind of learned the hard way, just through the forums and stuff like that. I don't have any other coding background, but I'm starting to get pretty comfortable with feature script. So that feels good.
So you mentioned the forums was a good place to start. What was that like, when you first started? How long did it take you from first starting Onshape to then dabbling in feature script?
It probably was a couple of years from first starting Onshape to being like, all right, I really am curious about what is going on here. And I saw other people posting some really amazing features. And so I was just, curious to explore it. I worked through the tutorials of that slot, creating feature for making flat panel designs. There's the tutorial that was made by Onshape, I don't know, a long time ago. And I went through that, and then I found there was 2 videos that were put out by cadjunkie.com a while ago. That's Adam O'Hearn over there. And so he made some feature script tutorials that I watched, and that helped. And then I started trying to just mess around with it. And whenever I would get stuck, I would post in the forums, and everybody was really helpful. I don't know how sustainable it is for decades to come or whatever, but at that time, and I think still currently, you can get feedback straight from the people who invented feature script. It's the developers are paying attention and are willing to offer feedback if you demonstrate that you're really trying to learn and not just trying to get somebody to do your work for you.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I would post really silly questions. I didn't know what a for loop was, and I was like, hey, how do I want to make a pattern, and I didn't know you had to iterate across a loop to do that. And so, Jake, I think, was like, oh, here's how you can do that, and just wrote it for me and shared it. And I was able to dig into his code and be like, oh, okay, all right, there's a lot going on here. And so it's just been a lot of instances like that of trying my hardest to get as far as I can, even if it's bad code or whatever. And then if I'm really, really stuck, I'll post on the forum, and usually can get a pretty good answer from somebody. There's it's not just the devs either. There's some other just people who are generous with their time. So I try to pay it forward in that way too, because I've gotten so much from other people. I try to participate and help other people too.
Yeah, it really is a nice community on the forums. There's some really good users that really take their time out and answer questions in a very thoughtful way. So we're really appreciative of the Onshape community members doing that. And I can't imagine it, not working that way now. But when we first started, it's how are we going to do this? How are we going to build this community? But the forums and the users have really made a big difference here. I really truly believe. Evan, maybe you can tell us a little bit about some of the custom features that you've built that you've shared with the community, and the impetus for writing these. What were some of the reasons? Was it for productivity or for just creating consistent geometry? Tell us a little bit more.
Yeah, I mean, part of it is just because it was a hobby, so it was like it kind of fun to dig into and to learn something new. And so some of them are silly stuff. I've probably written maybe 30 or more features at this point. And some of them are goofy stuff. Like I wrote one that will make a pan flute that you can 3D print, and you can like decide what scale you want it to be, and all of that. And it's like I'm never going to use that. I don't even really like to play the pan flute, but it was a fun kind of like collision of code and CAD and music, which are all three things I like. So, so there's goofy stuff like that that's just for fun. But the features that I like the most are the ones that I actually get to use professionally. So Freeform Spline is one of them. That's the one I submitted for the competition. And another one, that I use a lot, I call Selection Fillet. So it's kind of inspired by the Create Selection dialog, but allows you to like build these really robust queries based on part criteria instead of based on like picking individual edges. Because I found really at the end of a model, you have like
really good.
All these teeny tiny edges, and they're always changing because if you change something upstream, it always cascades down. And so they're always really fragile. And so I would always end up with a bunch of red at the end of my feature tree when I need to make a big change. And so I wrote this one instead so that you could basically tell it, instead of like going and individually picking like all 10 sides of a decagon, you can be like, just anything that was made by this extrude feature that points in that direction, like fillet that, and so you can build in some more robust logic. So that one's been a feature that I've wanted in some shape since even before Onshape. Like I have thought of that when I was in SolidWorks and was like, man, I wish that was a thing. So I was able to write that. I've written a similar one to produce draft, which kind of has a lot of the same issues. A lot of it happens late in the feature tree, and it's a lot of these tiny little fragile references that break all the time. So if you can set it up based on like criteria, it's going to be more stable.
Totally.
Let's see, other ones. I wrote one that mirrors multiple bodies across multiple planes at once and then Booleans them only to themselves, which is really useful for stuff that I do. Like I do a lot of parts that might have like a plastic part and then an overmold. And so those are touching. And if they're touching and you mirror it with the standard tool, they will all fuse into one part. And so, and there's no way around it. Like if you have parts with clearance, then you can do it and it'll maybe be okay. But, and a lot of times I'm working on parts that are like 4-way symmetrical or something like that. So instead of using like 8 mirror features, I can just use one multi-mirror feature, stuff like that. It just speeds up some workflow.
Right. Cool. Are there any future plans for feature? Like, do you think you've built everything you wanted in FeatureScript? Do you have anything in the fire right now, cooking in your mind right now?
Actually, I am really, really close to finishing one that I was working on over the weekend. I have been wanting to tinker with the linear pattern feature. So I just took the code that's open sourced, for the native linear pattern feature and copied everything that I could from it and then added just some additional functionality to it. So right now, when you make a linear pattern, you can only specify the space between the instances and not like the total length of the pattern or something like that. So if you're making, like a ladder and you want to design with the design intent in mind, and maybe you want a 6-foot ladder or a 12-foot ladder, but you always want the rungs like 16 inches apart. It's really hard to do that right now with the native feature. So I rewrote it so that you have the ability, if you want, to specify the total length and number of instances, or even to like measure things from the window. So if you had a sketch of like the full height of the ladder, you could click like a point at the bottom and a point at the top, and that would specify the length. So, just modifying stuff like that. Add a third direction to the pattern. Right now, the native feature only does 2 directions. So now you can do like a lattice structure or something if you wanted to do that.
It's a good call. Yeah. I like the that latter kind of pattern idea, and it's like the dream I think of the feature script developers, like for you to use it in that particular way. I think because
Mm-hmm.
you're you're going less from like I'm building a CAD model to more of like I have an engineering design and these are the parameters that go into my design versus just hack and whack,
Yeah.
like
Yeah,
building
absolutely.
building a feature list with 1,000 features in it.
Yeah.
Yep.
And for me, little bells are going off in my head right now hearing about this feature script that you're creating, because I think it would be perfect for my tiny house framing. So I'd love to get a hold of that when you're finished with it, Evan.
Okay. Yeah, it should be. I just need to bug test it a little bit, and then I like to make a video tour just because otherwise the features that people make can be a little bit hard to understand, which is a real shame because some of them are so powerful, but it's just like you open it up and you're like, I don't know what I'm looking at right now. So,
Where will we be able to find any of the features that you've built? What's the best place?
well, I have taken to appending the document name with Oval, OVYL. So if you just go to public documents and search that, you'll probably get a huge list of them. I think it's a unique enough word that most people probably haven't added that to their document name. So you could probably find a big list of them that way. That's probably the best way.
That's a great idea.
Yep.
We'll put a link to a search string in the Onshape podcast here. So yeah,
Cool.
That'll be great. Yeah.
Yeah, I like that.
Awesome. Well, Evan, thank you so much for joining us here today. I really appreciate this. We're going to talk to a couple of the other guests as well, or the other winners. So thanks again for participating. We really are just so thankful for you sharing, and it really helps other users become fluent in Onshape. So thank you.
Yeah, totally. I hope to make a tutorial on some feature script. I have an idea, but I just got to make the time to do it because I know there is there is a lack of that currently. Like I know people are hungry for it, so I know I was and still am. So I'll let you know when I get that done. Could be a while, but
well, it would be really valuable. I think I would love to go through that personally. I haven't spent enough time personally on it myself, so maybe this will be the thing that kicks me in the motion.
Yeah, could be. Awesome. All right. Well, I appreciate you having me on here. This has been super fun.
Good.
Awesome. Thank you again.
Yep. Thanks a lot, Evan. We'll talk to you soon.
Yeah.
And Eugenia Camacho is here with us, and she was instrumental in running that portion of the competition and hosting. So welcome back to the show, Eugenia.
Thank you for having me again. Yeah, this is awesome. And I feel like it's even more exciting because I am not just here to talk about this upcoming competition, but to talk about the results and some of the individuals who participated and won at the end of the day. As Mike said, we had a first competition last year that was focused on work from home environments. This year, it was really a free-for-all. It was submit your best design in 3 categories. We had art design, assembly design, and custom feature. And today, actually, we have 3 guests, and those 3 guests are our winners for 2 of those categories, those being the part design category as well as the assembly design category. So that's very exciting. I don't know if we want to bring them in and have them
let's bring in the winners.
Well, thank you all of you for joining us today. We'll start off with you, Brian. So as I said, submissions fell under 3 categories, and the first category we're going to talk about today is part design. This category consisted of sketches and features used to create unique and interesting parts. And the judges, we looked at the design process as well as the conceptual design. And Brian here was the winner with his Ant-Man helmet. And from what we understand, your Ant-Man helmet was designed to fit your own head, and it replicated what was seen on screen. So I would love for you to tell us a little bit about, how you came up with this concept. How long have you been working on it? Just kind of what drove you to make the Ant-Man helmet?
So I'm like a huge Marvel fan. So for many years, almost like 10 years now, I've been making Iron Man costumes. And I actually have done some of those in Onshape as well. But I really like the Ant-Man costume from the movie, and that's actually the conceptual work of Andy Park, so I can't take credit for the look of Ant-Man. But they have a wonderful like team of designers, so I thought, well, this is a great movie. It has a very different look from Iron Man. So I actually have a figure of it.
I love it.
And so I was like, this is something I'd like to make into a costume, and I wanted to make one like before the pandemic, and I ran out of time. And then of course there was like 2 years where I had plenty of time to work on it. So it took about 2 years to basically cut up the head.
Mm-hmm.
And this is actually the one I designed in Onshape.
Yeah.
And because I found on eBay a figure that was missing its head. So I was like, well, I know how to CAD. I'm working on this design anyway. I might as well replace his head while I'm working on the costume. So I figured that looked pretty good. And then I went on and designed all the internals and made the full-size helmet. And this actually has something I couldn't show on the rendering, but it actually has like an opening mechanism.
Wow. Wow, that is superb. And what did you use for reference to create the Ant-Man helmet? Did you like how did that work out?
I watched the movie a lot. There was actually some pretty good screenshots of both the movie and the toys, and then actually the artist Andy Park posts concept art as well, like the original ideas that are just hand painted digital drawings. So I kind of put all those together, and you know, I draw the front views and the side views in Onshape, and it's kind of like an old school starting approach, and then I use that to project 3D curves and make all the lofts as a way to model it. Yeah, so this is a little piece of like hardware that fits on his shoulder. I have them in different folders. This is the overall assembly. And I've split them up into multiple part studios because there's just so much stuff, like visual greeble is what they call in the movie industry. But so if you look here, they'll just highlight as they go, right? So I have very simple starting forms. This is the side view, the front view, and then I call them facets, which is sort of like the lines that make up the shape. That would include like ridges, and later on I'll have like a drawing for the eyes as seen from the front. So by going from 2D into 3D rather than trying to like form 3D curves as composites early on, I can see at a glance early on in these early sketches whether it like matches up to the proportions I want. And then only later do I worry about how do I loft it, how do I extrude things, and offset little details like this. Like early on, these details are not even in the drawings. This is an approach kind of like how they used to teach how to draw things, like how to draw animals and stuff. You just put in the easy, like the simple ovals and the backbone and stuff, and then worry about the details later. I'm trying to apply that approach to how I CAD.
And what ended up being the most challenging part to design for this helmet?
I would say it's this mask front faceplate. The thing is, in the original concept, it's a very smooth forehead, but then there's this very distinct ridge on the middle. So I tried to make it as one shape, but since the surfacing tools generally need like up to 4 edges, it's sort of and it has like either it's tangent or it's not. I realized I had to split it, but I was able to hide that seam right here with this fillet, which when you hide the edges, it's invisible. And then all the other ones are actually, they're a bunch of shapes, but they're not difficult shapes. So these are like surfaces of revolution, and there are a bunch of extrusions and stuff. But yeah, that was the main shape of this was hard to do.
Mm-hmm.
And then other things are like, I could create surfaces and then thicken them and then subtract that surface in order to create like a recess for the eyes, etc.
This is amazing. I'd like to actually open it up to Richard and Michael if you have any more questions for Brian and his design.
Yeah, I mean, this is fantastic, Brian. Thank you so much for sharing
Thank you.
it. I love the your analogy of like, the books that you use for illustration. I think that's a great thing when it comes to this kind of complex type of work, and that's a really good point of advice there. But it really is a sophisticated thing. It's smart to have multiple part studios and derive things in. These are techniques that are not only valid in Onshape but in other systems as well, right? So these
Right.
are also very good techniques. So yeah, thank you for sharing this. And Richard,
Thank you.
Are you ready to get yourself one of these, Richard? You gonna wear it around the Vegas Strip?
I wouldn't look
It
out
is
of place.
public.
Yeah, and this is Las Vegas. I wouldn't necessarily look out of place wearing it around here. Brian, I'll just reiterate what Michael said about your approach to surfacing. I've spent years trying to learn how to do real surfacing. I'm a mechanical guy. I'm big chunks of steel and socket head cap screws. But one of these days, I'm going to finally figure it out. And I'll take a little bit of that advice that you just gave us and try to work that into my approach. So I thank you for that.
Thanks. Well, one of the things about this helmet is that since I used to design in a mesh modeler, kind of like it's similar to Blender, and you can make incredible detail doing things in a software like that. But with Onshape, it's actually a mechanical engineering program. So I'm able to put in socket head cap screws, and that's actually how this thing is like put together. So it's incredibly modular, and it's still engineering precise. And that allowed me to make the helmet flipping mechanism like pretty easily integrated into the design. So it's really the best of both worlds.
Just wonderful. Thanks again, Brian.
Thank you.
Thank you, Brian. No, that's an amazing, amazing design. And we love the creativity that is showcased here, even not only just as a result, but even in your design process. The approach that you took is very unique. And of course, that was well deserved, and you won this category. So again, congratulations for that.
Congratulations.
Now, the assembly design category was focused more on looking at the build materials and whether the design showcased complex and realistic motion in the assembly. And boy, did they do that with this assembly. And so I want you guys to talk a little bit about the Octocanum design, but I also want to highlight that you didn't just win one category, but you also won Best Student Design. So congratulations for both of them. But yeah, please explain. I know you're both students, so I'd love to hear a little bit about, where you study, what you're studying, and also tell us about your design.
Yeah, so we're both students at Garfield High School in Seattle. I'm a senior, graduating this year, heading to the University of Washington.
Yeah, and I'm a sophomore, so still got 2 years in high school.
Yeah, and so we've been working together on CAD projects and mechanical projects from our robotics team, since we do Robotics Through First, which is a global nonprofit organization that organizes robotics competitions. And so we thought that it would be a cool project to both develop our CAD skills and maybe participate and get to see what other people are doing in the Onshape design competition if we attempted to make like from scratch like a complex type of drive face that isn't really seen much in the robotics competition we participate in. And so if do you want to pull up the CAD model? And you can...
Yeah.
And I think one intro question as you guys are pulling up the CAD model, I think it's fantastic that you're both involved in first, but can you tell us what a Mecanum drivetrain is and why this one is so different from others in FTC, the First Tech Challenge?
Absolutely. So a Mecanum drive base fundamentally uses, I'm going to grab one from our bin over here. It fundamentally uses wheels that have slanted rollers. So there's a bunch of rollers spaced around the outside of the wheel, and they're set at 45-degree angles, right? And so the idea behind driving this is when you drive the wheel forwards, it actually outputs a diagonal vector of force, right? And so by combining 4 of them at different angles, or rather running them in parallel and having them output force vectors in different directions, you can get a robot that moves not just forwards, backwards, but can also turn and strafe, so move side to side in any combination of those 3 degrees of freedom. And so that's really good for holonomic movement, right? Where you can control all of your positional, like your position along 3 axes, but it's not so good for when you run into things like terrain, right? So if you need to drive over bumps, especially sideways, these wheels, they're not effective at that. And forwards and backwards, they don't have as much traction because these rollers can slide forwards and backwards. So our approach was to add a second set of wheels that you can actuate downwards mechanically. And so those wheels have regular like traction-based surfaces. So it's like a car wheel. Here we use like a skateboard, I think. And so the idea is you can switch between, like toggle between the 2 states and either have lots of mobility and high speed or more terrain capabilities and more traction. Yeah, so it's actuated by a servo over here to the side. And the servo goes through a non-back drivable mechanism called an overrunning clutch. And so the reasoning behind that is when it's in either state, the robot needs to be able to stay in that state without the wheels getting pushed back up into the robot. And so one of the challenges here was packaging all of these complex mechanisms that all have to fit together and in as compact of a space as possible.
Absolutely. And go ahead, William.
Sorry.
Oh no, cool. This was a team design. I'd love to hear, Lillian, what you focused on, and Imans, what you focused on as you collaborated through this design.
Yeah, we collaborated on most aspects of this design. We went through a lot of versions of this drop pod versions, and had different versions where we were using like belt or chain, and also changing the way we shifted the octocannon modes. And then I also worked on CADing the gears using Evan's new feature script for the freeform spline feature script, which made CADing the Ys a lot easier.
Yeah, in the past, and I'll say this, I was incredibly impressed by Evan Reese's submission for the feature script. The freeform spline makes WireCAD go from like the most awful, obnoxious thing in CAD ever across all softwares to something that's reasonable and easy, like not too difficult. Like we could throw this together and I think we did the wires.
Like hour.
Yeah, it was an hour or 2 to get full wiring for something like this, where it's not just like simple straight pathways. You can get realistic pathways. You can figure out where wires are actually going to run in your final model. And so freeform spline feature was like an integral part of the process.
I love it. We should have Evan Reese again come in and talk about his winning design as well. And just talk about custom features as a whole. I think they're so rich and important in design. So I absolutely love the shout out and the usage there. I'm aware that you are building this now, correct? Have you started building this design in real life? How far out are you? And I know you said in your submission that some of these parts were going to be laser cut, others going to be 3D printed. How far are you in that actual production of this?
Yeah, so we've started development for some of the sub-mechanisms, like the most important one being the custom wheels. So the Mecanum wheels in this design are a lot smaller and more compact than ones that are like traditionally available on the market. And so we had to design fully from scratch Mecanum wheels that would fit into our specs and also have the load capacity that we needed. And so for that, we actually wrote a custom feature that calculates out the roller, the roller geometry along the top of the outside of the thing. It was a little bit more complicated than projecting just a cylinder onto an angled sketch. But we have here one of the Mecanum wheels that's under construction. And so you can see this pretty closely matches what we have in the CAD model. It has a bunch of cast polyurethane rollers with steel tubing as a core to give it strength that run around the edges. They each house small, I think 2 millimeter inner diameter bearings. So that's MRZZ5. So 5mm outer diameter, 2mm inner diameter on steel pins for shafts. And then the whole thing is, it has bearings seated on the inside, which means that we can mount it a lot more compactly, where it just has like a stationary standoff for the axle rather than having an entire rotating axle. We just directly mount things to the mechanic wheel and cut out some stuff from it. Yeah, custom wheels.
That's amazing. That's amazing. I know Richard and Michael have joined us. So
Yeah. I mean, this is, once again, congratulations, Lillian and Avance. I mean, how long have you been using Onshape?
I started 3 years ago, I think, my sophomore year. And then I haven't looked back since. We were using Autodesk Inventor. And while it's a powerful piece of software, collaboration is just not the same as with Onshape. Let's say that. Yeah. So I've got about 3 years under my belt.
Yeah. I actually started when I was like a freshman, like 1.5 years ago. I was mostly mentored by Imans and really enjoy using Onshape.
Awesome. It's obvious. I mean, this is a great design. I mean, it's so detailed and, revolutionary, no pun intended, wheel design here. So it's, I wonder why all vehicles don't have this type of drive now. But, this is really awesome.
And the CAD model itself, I mean, this one gets my heart racing because I saw gears and I saw chains and I see steel, and I'm pretty sure I saw some socket head cap screws there too.
Oh yeah.
But I look over at your feature tree or your assembly tree, and I see things that are named, and I see things that are in folders, and I think, wow, these, that's great organization, especially for collaboration. You're trying to get other people to work on your designs, and they need to understand what's going on, and that's one of the ways to do that. So congratulations, Lillian and Amantz, on a great design and on a great win.
Thank you.
Absolutely. Yeah, those are our guests from the competition today. Thank you, all three of you, for showing us your design, kind of getting us to ask you a couple more questions, and of course, congratulations once again.
Thanks, guys. See you later. Thanks again.
Thank you.
All right. Thank you again, Eugenia, for that. And, can't wait to see what the championship belt looks like next year.
Oh, yeah. Thank you both.
Thanks, Eugenia.
Well, wasn't that?
Hey,
I mean,
yeah, but I mean, just amazing work, and especially from such young people, and the next generation. I need to mention this because I don't know if our listeners or our viewers know that Imans is actually the younger brother of Alnis Smidgens. And I think they're probably going to be really something special in the century. There have been brother inventor teams over the centuries. Back in the 1700s, we had the Montgolfier brothers and their hot air balloons, right? The Lumiere brothers, they invented the cinematograph. I can't really pronounce that.
How's your
They
French?
did better than Edison did with his camera because they actually had projection capabilities. In the 1900s, of course, we had the Wright brothers, and now in the 2000s, we have the Smidgens brothers, and I can't wait to see what those guys accomplished. So.
That's great.
So we've talked about the conference. We talked about our insights into it. We had some great interviews with the great guests. But what we haven't talked about is the production itself and what goes into that, and the people that are behind running a show like that. So we have a special guest with us, the Director of Media Production at PTC, Matt Butler. Hello, Matt.
How's it going, guys?
Just great. Just great. I'm enjoying this nice podcast studio that you probably had something to do with.
Yes. Thanks for having me on. This is awesome. It's really cool just to see those design competition winners again. It's like constantly blown away by just the work that they can crank out, especially with Onshape. It's very cool. So congrats to them again, because it was very cool stuff.
So, Director of Media Production at PTC. That means what, Matt?
It's really just a fancy title, but I basically lead a team of incredibly talented and passionate production people within PTC's internal agency. So we've got basically a small army of about 20 people, all in: designers, copywriters, animators, editors, camera operators, the whole nine. And so I lead the sort of production arm of that. And so for probably the last 8 years or so, we've just been kind of the all in one go-to shop for any kind of video creation that any of our PTC colleagues has needed.
Full disclosure, I have taken advantage of Matt and his team when I recorded the user group video. By the way, I want to tell you guys again how comfortable you all made me feel, how easy the whole process was. I was nervous to begin with. I wanted to do it in several takes, and you guys said, "Nah, just go for it. You'll be fine." And one take, and we got it done. So thanks again.
Yeah.
How long ago did you start working on Onshape Live 22? I imagine it's quite a long process to put everything in place and to turn such a production out. I was so impressed with the production values of the conference that I just wanted to see what it took.
Well, thank you. Yeah. So this year, this is our second year doing Onshape Live. And actually last year was pretty much the first kind of fully in-house production we had tried to pull off. COVID sort of, it forced a lot of things, and it's been absolutely terrible, but there have been some silver linings. And I think one of those was it really forced the company and the team to really kind of just rethink how we created content. And our sort of annual user conference, LiveWorks, was basically put on ice and forced to go virtual, and it made us sort of lean in and try and figure out how to replicate kind of an in-person experience digitally. And we had tried some things, got some successes, but we really hadn't tried it fully on our own until the Onshape team came to us 2 years ago now, so for 2021, and said, "Hey, we want to do this live user group conference. Are you up for it?" And we were like, "Yeah, sure, why not? Let's figure it out." So I mean, that was intense compared to this year. We basically, I don't want to say we figured it all out, but we learned a lot over the previous year, so that when we got to this year, there was already kind of a handful of best practices. But what's funny about the sort of team that I work with, and I'm sure a lot of your audience can maybe relate, and engineers can relate. It's like, just because you did something good in the past doesn't mean you just do it over again. I mean, make it harder on yourself. Try new things. Go bigger. Go badder. And so this year I think we kicked it off in earnest right around the December timeframe. Maybe like just before Christmas is when we started to talk about what we wanted to do. And yeah, it's basically went pretty smooth up until usually, it's like the 2 weeks just before the show is when everything's like, "Oh no, we got a show to produce," and everybody's just cranking away and making it come together. So,
well, they did. Your team did a fantastic job. I did notice a difference. Not that the production values in 21 were bad, but you could really tell the difference. You could tell with this year, it just landing on the site itself and seeing some of the videos and how they were presented. Yeah,
no, it really is. Good. Like it's just like watching a live production of BattleBots or an ESPN Sports Center. It was at that level of. Hopefully that's not a derogatory thing. Hopefully
no, not at all.
Those guys at ESPN.
No, not at all. I mean, that's what we strive for, right? I mean, we all love to sort of pour our hearts into it and try and turn it into something great. And it's just every time needs to be better than the last, and we try and find ways to improve it. I mean, even the design, I think actually one of the things I'm most proud of is how the design competition came together this year, is because we just had such awesome content. And last year, I think the design competition was sort of like it was a last minute ad. I don't think it was a real thing until maybe 2 weeks before the show.
Yeah, there was not much time.
Yeah. And so we really threw it together, and it was cool. But this year we really had the benefit of time, and we sort of worked with the team to say, "Hey, what can we do to really show off these designs?" And, we had awesome people like Mackenzie and the rest of the team just working to get through all the submissions and pull all of those screen recordings. And then of course, everybody on our team, between Rachel and Gemma and Casey and Charles, really just pulling it together just to make that presentation awesome. It was very cool. Maybe a last kind of shout out to the whole team. I think you said at the beginning, Mike, that just like the amount of work that goes into it, it is enormous. I mean, thousands of hours of people sort of pulling this stuff together. And it's just so rewarding to, you say, hey, we're going to do this. And it's like, cool. Now let's actually do it. And just the, the camaraderie and sort of everybody sort of coming together and figuring out like how best, like, what is the message we want to give to the audience? And then how do we really make that come to life and honor the story the best way possible? Is just, it's so much fun. I'm so proud of what we did, and definitely looking forward to going bigger next year. I'm not sure how we're going to do that, but we'll find ways to make it hard on ourselves. That's for sure.
Well, please give our best to the team and our congratulations as well.
Yep.
Thanks again, Matt.
Yep.
Thanks, Matt. And in case you're wondering what you missed, if you haven't seen this, you can still see this.
Yeah.
So you can just Google Onshape Live 22. It'll bring you right to an Onshape page where you can register to watch the recordings. And in here you can see there's the entire agenda is here from Jim and John, Jim Herstick and John, or Jim Heppelman and John Herstick, and their keynotes. Actually, Jim gave a great talk on agile product management and
And if you did attend, if you had already registered and you missed a couple of those sessions, your existing registration works. Just go back and log in using your registration name and password, and you can catch up on those sessions that you did miss. So I think they'll be on demand for a couple of months, won't they?
At the very least, I would imagine. Yeah. So let's definitely register if you haven't seen that yet, and share with everybody else. The great engineering event that Matt and the team and the rest of the Onshapers, we want to thank obviously all the customers. There are too many people. I can't just rattle them all off right now, but there's just so many people, the customers, the design competition participants and winners. It's just,
well, and the presenters too. We can't leave our Onshape employees out. They did a great job.